The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any organization. The participants are expressing their personal opinions and perspectives. This is Conservation and Science Podcast, where we take a deep dive into topics of ecology, conservation, and human-wildlife interactions. And I'm Tommy Serafinsky, and I always try to bring you diverse perspectives on the topics that I cover, on the topics that we cover in this episode. And this episode is the one that I know some of you are waiting for a long time, and quite frankly, I was waiting to make that episode and to put it out for quite a while, over a year actually. And also some of you are waiting for this episode to become widely available, because it was available for a number of weeks already as an early access to my members on Buy Me a Coffee, right? So you can become a member of this conservation science community on Buy Me a Coffee. There's a link in the description of the show. And as a member, you'll have early access to some of the episodes, or maybe free access to paywalled episodes, discount codes, VIP seats for events, etc., etc. Also updates from me about what's coming in the podcast, sneak peeks, work in progress, etc., etc. But most importantly, by being a member, you are supporting my work. You're supporting what I do here, and by no means this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is merely to help me in basically bearing the cost of running this podcast, hosting licenses and stuff like that. So if you decide to become a member on Buy Me a Coffee, that will be greatly appreciated. And then you'll have access to all those perks that I mentioned. So going back to this episode is about TB in deer. And you will hear in the episode a little bit of a history, why it took me over a year to do this episode. And I think that in the end, it turned out to be much better than I originally wanted to make, because at least we speak truthfully, honestly, boots on the ground truth about TB in deer from the perspective of hunters. So I think that on the end of the day, we managed to deliver huge value for all you recreational hunters, but also people who are in general interested in TB in deer, and perhaps farmers even. And just a note that this episode, that episode, the recording was part of the episode 200. And if you want to listen and learn more about the upcoming changes to deer management in Ireland, you can go back and listen to episode 200. And this conversation was part of the recording of episode 200. But because the topic of TB in deer is so important, I took it out, edited out from the other episode, and I'm publishing it right now as a standalone episode. So I don't hope that you will learn a lot. I am sure you will learn a lot. And as always, feedback is welcome. You can leave the comment on their YouTube video. You can leave the comment on Spotify if you're listening to it, or you can just subscribe to my newsletter and hit reply on any of the emails that you get from me. And that way, your message will get straight to my inbox, and I encourage you to do so because I like feedback and I like this conversation going. Okay, so now, without any further ado, Ashley Glover, and we going to talk about the realities of TB in deer from the hunter's perspective.
I really was inspired by you to talk about, and I was trying to do that episode for yourself for almost a year. Is an issue of the TB in deer, and more specifically, what happened from the hunter's perspective if they're unfortunate enough to shoot the deer with TB. And just for listeners, I was trying to do that episode sort of like most of the conservation and science episodes, the scientists with discussing it, and man, it was impossible. No one wanted to talk about it with me. I've been emailing people, calling people, meeting them at the conferences. I was referred by other scientists who were already on the podcast to get a little bit of a, kudos and credentials, that I'm not sort of a wacko looking for controversy. And man, like one of the scientists, he's a professor in one of the top universities in Ireland, and he's not working specifically with TB, but I was talking to him about this issue, and he said, like, Tommy, fucking ignore it. It will go away. No one will talk with you about this. And I think they won't, because all those scientists, they have their email addresses at gov.ie. And probably that's because that's the reason. Ashley, so we're going to, obviously we are not infectious diseases experts, but we are hunters. And this is from the perspective of hunting and hunter. So first, let's start from the very beginning. Once you or a hunter shoot a deer, how they can tell that this deer is diseased, that this deer has a TB. And oh, just by the way, all the new hunters, you will get that on the HCAP or similar training course right now. And all your seasoned hunters, I have full expectations that you already know, but if you don't tell anyone. You can learn from Ashley right now.
So I think the narrative, to step back a bit, the narrative is that there are three elements. One, that bovine TB is a notifiable disease. Number two, that there is free testing of the carcass. And number three, that there is licensed disposal if the carcass has bovine TB. So when I was actually in that position, I found that that's not the case. So the first deer that I shot that had signs of bovine TB, how you see it, and again, you'll learn this when you do your HCAP, or there's lots of photos that I wouldn't look at, if you're going to eat online, but it would be generally inside when you're grokking the animal, it will be the liver, the lungs, and the nodes in the base of the neck. If it's extensive, you can also see nodules on the inside of the rib cage. But generally, I find, and I've shot a number of animals. Up until this year, I had only shot one animal ever with signs of TB, but I'm now shooting in a new area where the incidence of TB is higher. I think out of the first 12 I shot this year, 4 had signs of TB.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. Now this is, I haven't seen it since. So it may be certain areas of Wicklow have higher incidence of TB in the deer herd than others. Because I hadn't seen it in the areas local to me, but I'm now shooting in North Wicklow, and I'm seeing it more.
So what did you see on the?
So first thing is the animal looks before you shoot it, and after the animal is lying on the ground, it looks perfectly healthy. I have not seen an animal that had any, let's say, outward signs. They were looking fit and healthy. They weren't moving in a strange way. They had no visible outward signs. But on the grok, interestingly, on most of them didn't see any evidence on the liver, but their lungs were completely shot. As a friend of mine said, "Oh, did you check their pockets for cigarettes?" It looks like they were a heavy smoker. And when you, obviously, and the hunters will know this, when you're grokking an animal, wear gloves. I wear 2 pairs of gloves, the long calving gloves and small gloves over those. And you can feel in the liver like calcified, or in the lungs kind of like hard bits that aren't natural. So that's probably the best sign. I believe there are other diseases other than bovine TB that can cause such things, but generally, while if there's no way of testing, then, and you see those signs, I think you're better to err on the side of caution and not put that animal into the food chain. I certainly wouldn't.
Yeah. And so this is an important question. Like, what are the risks for the hunter in even like when opening?
There's no evidence of any transfer of bovine TB to humans from carcass handling. Obviously, people in abattoirs handle cattle all the time with bovine TB. So there's no evidence. I looked into this before, and there was one suspected case of transfer in the States once where it was passed into a hunter who wasn't wearing gloves and into a cut or something like that, but one ever. So there is no evidence of transferring bovine TB to humans. It's respiratory, it's past respiratory.
And I even read somewhere online, and by the way, I'm not recommending that, but that apparently you can eat the meat of that deer, but again, again, it's like you wouldn't eat that deer.
I wouldn't. You know, there shouldn't be. It's not held in the meat, so there shouldn't be a reason not to. It's just, I suppose, you have a bit of an ick, and I'm shooting a lot of deer. I don't need to be eating the ones that have a disease. But it's so most hunters will go through their entire hunting career and not shoot a deer that they see evidence of TB, and it appears that there are certain areas of Wicklow where TB in the deer population is more, but it doesn't appear to be an issue in other parts of Ireland. So it may be that if you're not shooting in Wicklow, you'll never see it. And most of my friends that shoot have never seen it.
Well, that's on one hand, this is a good indication, but just anecdotally from me talking with hunters, watching videos on YouTube even, I noticed that over the last 2 years, that topic comes up more often.
Yeah.
And you see more videos with people, like the typical YouTube video. Oh, here's I tell you how to deal with a deer with TB, and even colleagues who are just messaging me.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, such and such guy. I was like, no, what's happened? Like, oh, he shot a deer with TB, and like, all the. Yeah. So, and again, this is anecdotal.
Yeah.
But it would seem from where I sit that it is becoming more prevalent, more more often.
So I know UCD, and you obviously know Killian. I think you've spoken to Killian before. He's doing some research on this at the moment in TB, bovine TB in general, and I know he's got some new data that's going to be coming out soon. So maybe he'll be good to have on the podcast in the future.
There's no way he's gonna talk to me.
Yeah, he won't talk to you. But you never know. Like, science needs to be communicated, and we've spoken about this before. Science needs to be communicated, and running the numbers without having without talking about them is just crazy, because what's the point in doing the science and then not communicating the science?
Well, that was my thing, and this is what I was talking to these scientists, and it's like, hey, I don't want to tell you. I don't want you to tell me anything that is not true or whatever, right? And I'm not looking for controversy, and you're doing the science. So, no. Like one of the friendly farmers told me, like, yeah, they're not gonna talk to you because they don't want to be accused of being in bed with farmers. But then that I could see that equally going other way around.
Yeah,
it's just such a unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing to talk about. It's and the same with the badger program, the wildlife program, where badgers are snared, vaccinated or culled, and there isn't great communication around that. Like, if you try and find the information about it, it's not online. It's very hard to see. Certainly if you're a farmer impacted by TB, and you think, rightly or wrongly, that is because you're in an area that has a lot of deer or a lot of badgers, and then you don't have access to the underlying information, and you're seeing at the moment, and we know this, we're spending 150 million on the TB eradication program, and the numbers are going the wrong way. So I think there does need to be a better communication strategy around bovine TB, and I think as part of the new deer management units that will be set up, and if there's going to be a system of community larders and chillers and so on for hunters, because as you know, at the moment it's very limited where you can bring your carcasses. There's only 3 game dealers in Ireland. So what happens if you shoot an animal at the moment that has signs of TB? You have 2 choices. Either leave it on the hill, bury it, which often isn't an option. Like in the Wicklow uplands, trying to bury it with a spade ain't going to work, right? You'd be there all day.
Provided you have a spade.
Provided you've got a spade. But, trying to dig into, into a sick spruce plantation or, into a rocky Wicklow hillside can be challenging. So I think what, or you can pay Larry Earls, the Fallen Animal Service, €100 to come and pick up the carcass,
So I want to stop you here, because this is exactly the meat of the conversation that interests me. You are a hunter. You shoot that deer.
Yeah.
Right. And you're cut into it. You're positive. Yeah, that's a TB deer.
Well, first of all, you can't be positive because you haven't tested. So one of the things that you're told, well, you did HCAP, you were told there was free testing, weren't you?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There isn't. So,
and this is
well,
my
there
point.
is and there isn't. So if you're, I believe the rules at the moment are, if you are a farmer that's locked down with TB, if a hunter shoots a deer on your farm, you're asked to bring in a number of carcasses to Back Weston for testing. But that's like...
So Back Weston, just for people to know, Back Weston is a lab.
That's the main lab where all the TB experts are, yeah, and where the testing is done. But that's a kind of artificial cross-section, right, because they're ones like that, well, there's TB there, and then you see one that's got evidence of TB and you bring it, of course, you're going to get a high rate. That's not like just taking a transect across a glen in Wicklow, shooting 100 deer and bringing all of them and testing them. So you're getting like a very maybe artificially high amount if you test ones that already look like they've got TB that are from TB hotspots.
Yes.
Of course. Yes. So I think, maybe the approach will be...
But what you should do, what is the letter of law, or at least the spirit of law, that once you have that deer, you should, the first course of action is either to call the farmer that allowed you, that gave you permission to hunt, or you should what is the theory, what you should do by the book?
Okay, so again, this is my understanding. It's very hard to find this written anywhere, but this is, when a hunter goes through HCAP or something like this is generally what they're told, is it's a notifiable disease. So who do you notify? So you ring your regional veterinary office. In our case, it's Enniscorthy, and you tell them. But when I tried that, they weren't interested. They were like, oh, we know deer have TB. Why are you telling us? And I'm like, well, because I believed it was a notifiable disease and I'm notifying, do you not want to know where? Or, and then I asked, well, where do I send the plug for testing? And they're like, well, if you want to test your deer, you can bring it to an agricultural vet in Rathdrum or whatever, and he'll test it for you and pay him. But we don't want that information. And I was like, oh, that isn't the way I was told it was supposed to work. Yeah. And then I was like, well, when are you coming to pick up the carcass? I don't want to leave it on the land. And they're like, no, there's and
this is the biggest thing. And I again, it's a contentious topic, so I need to be careful how I frame that. Let's say I was a part of the conversation with a number of hunters who are just, let's call them young hunters.
Yeah.
Not necessarily age, but to the sport or to the hunting itself. And one of the very experienced, hunter, and we had a conversation about the TB, and they were highlighting roughly what you said. And one of those young hunters asked, okay, so what to do, right? Because we're going through this, and there's one lab, and you can bring it there and that, right? But it's 8 p.m. on Friday.
Yeah.
All those things are not working over the weekend. Yeah. And here you are with that deer. So what to do?
Yeah.
And the answer was one of the most telling yet unsatisfying answers that I heard, which was well, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what the law said.
Yeah.
And it's oh, okay. So to me, and I think for everybody who's mindful of the risks, it should be what to do with the carcass now. Because that carcass should be removed.
Yeah, but remember, Tommy, that animal was going to die at some stage anyway. whether it was shot by a hunter, hit by a car, or died of natural causes. So it was TB stays in the animal. It wasn't any different when a hunter was involved in the loop.
But now, since you are involved, you have an opportunity to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where there is a gap in the TB eradication program, in that maybe, a more randomized testing would be a better approach, because at the moment, there's a narrative in Wicklow, for example, the IFA lads or whatever will say, 16% of deer in Wicklow have TB. It's not true. Like, the department will tell you that's not true. And you would see it, so.
Department will tell you, but not on record.
Yeah. You would see yourself if you were, if you were an active hunter, that, 16% of, is just, it's probably less than 1%. Yeah. I don't know how much less than 1%, but it's less than 1%. So,
so you have that deer, and so you have that deer on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, we established that there's no point of trying to notify anyone at this point, because no one is interested unless the landowner.
This is my experience. My experience was there was no point in telling anyone. There was no testing coming, and I paid my €100 to the Fallen Animal Service just to prove the point that there was no carcass removal
service. So tell us about that, because that was like, this is why this conversation is so interesting, that you, one, had all the knowledge that you're supposed to have, which is, I would guess, is not that common among hunters. They would be very surprised what to do.
Yeah, so because they're not seeing.
Because they're not seeing. Yeah, so you
bovine TB in the deer that they shoot. Exactly. It's so rare that you will see it.
Exactly. So you already had that thing, and then you decided to go this extra, I wouldn't say extra mile, you went like extra 10 miles to get to the bottom of that thing. So tell us about this whole story of you try to dispose the carcass. You're driving around with the TB deer in the back of your truck.
Yeah, so that's so probably you shouldn't, be moving it around in your vehicle. That's, in hindsight,
in whichever, whatever you do is
wrong. Like, if you leave it on the hill, and a lot of the places, just, I'm not maybe your regular deer hunter, and a lot of the places that I shoot deer are public access places. Mm-hmm. They are Onoga or Scouting Ireland or other places that have public access. So leaving carcasses on the hill is not something that I would be doing. Now, sometimes you can't retrieve your carcass, as if you shoot an animal, that animal can run with a heart and lung shot 150 meters into a quilcher block, and even with a thermal you may not find that animal. Even with a dog you may not find that animal. So my approach, even if I do a lot of humane dispatch call outs, as you know, I live in one of the areas where humane dispatch call outs are probably the most in the state, between Glen the Downs, the nature reserve there, and Coins Cross is the hotspot for deer collisions in Ireland, probably. So I don't leave those animals on the side of the road. After I've dispatched them, I put them through the same process as if I'd regularly hunted them. So I open them up, check for TB, and dispose of the carcass. But there isn't a system in place for disposal. I'm lucky, I know a lot of farmers, and they have land that they can bury them and so on. But I think for most people, the decision is, if you shoot a deer that has signs of TB, you open it up, you see the lungs and the liver, and the inside is signs of TB, then you walk away. But often, as I said, in the places that I shoot, that's not an option.
And or bury if you can.
Bury is or at least bury the
offal, the
pluck,
lungs and all that.
Yeah.
And so you drove to this incinerator, is it how it's called?
No, the Fallen Animal Service have a truck, and they come and pick up the carcass from you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent.
And the local hunters are still laughing at me because I paid €100 to get an animal. They'd never had a call out for a deer before. Never. There is one service.
So it's a fallen animal service. That's how it's called. So people will need to look it up.
Yeah, that's if your horse dies or
that is close to
your livestock dies. They come with a truck and take it away. It goes into incineration. Yeah, I think it's technically category 2 waste. So, there is a system for that, but it's €100 every call out. So, but again, if, maybe that's something that could be covered by the department if they thought that. But then, those animals are going to die on the hill anyway. So,
probably you also want to notify the landowner if it's a private farmer, a landowner, as a matter of courtesy.
Yeah, I guess where that becomes maybe problematic is if the landowner is a cattle farmer. They may have sensitivities about being informed or knowing, or what do they do with that information.
You go like say, hey, you can pretend that I never called you and we never had that conversation, but
yeah. But in general, I don't shoot on farms. I'm shooting generally in native woodland schemes.
Yeah.
Often in behind deer fences.
Yeah.
That would be my most kind of common place where I would cull deer.
I think there is a lot of listeners to this podcast who are shooting on farms and getting permissions on a farm.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good idea then to just upfront ask the farmer like, hey, in unlikely event, I hear I shot the deer with TB. Do you want to know about it?
And that's the key thing, Tommy. It's in the unlikely event, because most hunters will go through their entire hunting career and never see this. So, for most hunters, it isn't an issue. I think, the amount of deer that are shot that have signs of TB is small. And I think it wouldn't be a huge deal to have, just a protocol for notification, testing and disposal. And maybe the disposal bit would be a step too far. But I think perhaps what would be, if there's going to be community larders and community chillers now as part of DMUs, then having a sealed skip that carcasses that are either not suitable for the food chain for other reasons, maybe, they've been misshot, or they
spoiled.
They were in a road accident, so they were humane dispatch and things, so they're just not suitable for food. So those carcasses then have a place to be dropped, rather than leaving them on the hill or trying to bury them in Wicklow granite.
Okay, folks, you heard it firsthand here on this podcast. What to do in the unlikely and unfortunate event of shooting deer with TB. So I'm not going to be repeating that. You can listen to it again if you want. But if I presume what I'm taking away, like if you really want to be like by the book and you have a spare €100, then you should call the fallen animal service and dispatch of the animal. Otherwise, try to bury it. Otherwise, tough.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that. That was, folks. That was as good as we could do, and I think that for the purpose of this podcast and for hunters, this is very useful. I will keep trying to get the scientists, infectious diseases experts to talk about the TB again. Before you go. Since you stick to the end of this show, then first and foremost, thank you so much for listening and for watching. And if you enjoy what I do here, and I presume you do since you listen to the very end, you should subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the description of the show, newsletter.tommysoutdoors.com. So get in there and you will get notifications not only about the latest episodes of the podcast, but also about everything else that is happening in the conservation and science world.